Hey, what is up guys, this is Rahul here and welcome back to my channel. One of the biggest reasons why a person chooses their phone is because of its cameras. Now some smartphones have great hardware but their software is just terrible. Meanwhile other smartphones such as the Google Pixel 2 has decent hardware but spectacular software. And if you didn't know, the Google Pixel 2 actually has the best camera smartphone in the market right now. In this video we're going to take a look at how to install the Google Pixel 2 camera in your smartphone and moreover how does it compare. Now if you already know how to install this on your smartphone, skip over to this time to see the comparison. Alright, so first things first. The Google Pixel 2 camera does not support every smartphone. Now if you need to see a list of all the smartphones that's supported, I'll put a link down below to this XDA website which provides link to every single smartphone that is supported. For Asus Zenfone Max Pro, Essential Phone HTC, Lee Eco, Lenovo, LG, Motorola, Nokia, OnePlus, Razer, Samsung. All these devices are supported and that's literally all you need to do. Go down to this website, see which device that you have and download the APK for that. Now for dual cameras such as my LG G6, there are two variants of Gcam that you can download. The one for the normal primary camera and one for the wide angle camera. Suppose let's say I choose the LG G6 APK, which is the C Stock 27 version 3.8. Now all you need to do is just go down to this website and you can see download the standard rear plus front camera, the APK for that, and the wide rear plus front camera and the APK for that. And literally all you need to do is click on this link and download and install this on your phone. And just to make sure, you might want to tweak the settings in your smartphone to allow you to download third-party applications, and that's about it. That's all you need to do. Now starting with the comparisons, this is the first photo that I took with the LG G6's stock camera. This is actually one of the most trickier types of photo that you can take because it is coming under direct sunlight behind this object and the HDR has to really work hard to brighten up the darker areas of this image. Now this is a fairly standard image here. There's nothing much to complain. The skies are well balanced, the exposure is decent. The darker areas are pretty fine, I would say. It's not the best, but it is still a great picture. Now going over to the Gcam's photo, I have mixed feelings about this. Now the HDR definitely works. The darker parts of the image are much more clearer, much more sharper, much more well lit. But there is this weird greenish tint to this photo. This is actually a very repeating factor across all photos taken with the Gcam app. There is this either purplish or greenish tint to most of their photos. Now it usually balances out when it comes to darker conditions, but in bright images such as this, it's coming off as really weird. Overall the image is sharp. The skies are pretty much the same except for the fact that it might be a bit overexposed. Overall I think the stock camera does a better job in these photos. Now going to some indoor shots. This is a photo that I took from a mall. Now the G6 is there's a lot of artifacts happening. It's a bit over sharpened and if you especially zoom in it looks like a painting, and that's due to the really strong processing by the LG G6's stock camera app. Now you can see here the person in this image is really softened out. The whole image is soft in general. Now switching over to the Gcam's picture, it's night and day difference. Now you might not see it off the back, but there is definite difference here. The person in this image, the hair it's not as soft as the LG's photo. It is much more clearer and if you zoom into a lot of these areas you can see that it's much well exposed. The brighter and the darker sides are more equally exposed than compared to the LG's photo. And if you were to look in the ground, I'll put a side-by-side comparison up here. You can clearly see that there is much more texture and definition in the picture of the Gcam's photo compared to the LG's photo. Now just to remind you, I took all these photos in auto mode. Now this photo is pretty much a tie with the LG and Gcam. There is not much of a difference. There is a slight difference in color temperatures and how these cameras perceive different colors. Overall I kinda prefer the Gcam's photo just because it's a little bit more sharper and it's not as soft as the LG's photo. Now coming over to the fourth photo, now even this is pretty much the same compared to the LG's and the Gcam photo. except for the fact that the orange tinge that I mentioned, it's pretty apparent, especially if you look at the glass down below. The LG's photo is more color accurate compared to the Gcam's, although for some reason the Gcam's photo does look more pleasing. And if you were to look up at the woodworking in the top, the Gcam's photo is actually more color accurate here. It looks more real to life compared to this orangey thing going on with the LG stock camera. And overall, it's pretty much the same here. The Gcam does have a slight advantage. Now this photo is an example of a portrait photo. Now this is my friend here. For a camera that doesn't inherently support a portrait feature, and using the portrait mode using the Gcam is actually really good here. This can actually pretty much rival many smartphones out there with dual camera setups just made for depth sensing. It's a real good addition to your camera as well. So if you just want a portrait feature that works really well, just download the Gcam app, and it pretty much works 90% of the time. These two photos, when you look at it, it is the same, but it's when you zoom in you see the difference. The Gcam's photo has much more depth, much more texture to it. Now, if I were to zoom in on the LG's camera, you cannot see the finer details. It's just all like an oil painting. You know, if I move over to the Gcam, you can see there's a lot more tiny specks of dirt happening all around. I mean, it's just a minor detail, but it is still a detail. All in all, both are pretty much the same. The LG and the Gcam did a great job, but I still prefer the Gcam's photo over this. Both these photos are really good. There's nothing wrong with both these photos, but it does show how both these devices perceive colors differently. Now in the LG's photo, if you look at the top left, you can see that the whole area has a brown tinge. Meanwhile, if I were to switch over to the Gcam's photo, the colors are really accurate here. You can see that the wood is, this dark coffee brownish color, and the skies and the walls are white and everything. There's no sort of tinge happening here. There's also not that green tinge happening which we saw in the previous photos, and even if you look in the top, the blues are really well exposed and balanced. And if I were to switch over to the LG's photo, you can see that the blues aren't as strong and there's still that brown tinge happening. Both these photos are pretty good, but I sort of prefer the Gcam's photo just because it's more real to life and it is more color accurate. Now this photo is one of the times where you can clearly see the Gcam working. It's HDR enhanced. Now the Gcam's photo, no problem with this, it's a pretty LG photo, but switch over to the Gcam one. Here's where you really see the difference. The photo is much more sharper, the darker spots are much more brightened out while having a well exposed sky. The skies in both the images are literally the same. The only difference are the darker spots are much more brighter, it's much more clearer, it's much more sharper. This is a straight up win for the Gcam. Coming over to this next photo, you can see that the LG's photo is a bit mushy. It is struggling here. There is fair amount of detail, but it is a bit blurry, and I'm not really liking this photo. Meanwhile, the Gcam has a definite win. The picture is crystal clear, it's really sharp, and then again, it is still well exposed here. You can see the darker areas much better, you can see the finer details much better, and it's more real to life than the previous photo. Now coming to some extremely dark conditions, the LG camera straight up struggles here. You can see that the bottom area is overexposed. The backside, there is basically no detail. The ISO is way up high, there's a lot of noise, there's no details here, and it is a really bad photo. But switch over to the Gcam, you can see that there's a lot of thing happening here. Now, and in the bottom half of the picture, it is really clear, it is much sharper, it is much well exposed. Go over to the top, in the buildings back behind, you can see much more colors, it's much more well exposed, much more detailed. But look over to the sky and you see the post-processing kind of messes up the sky here. Now this is not an issue with the LG photo, it is much more natural, it is much more real like the sky, but for some reason the Gcam's photo has weird artifacting happening around. I'm not sure why, but it is happening. Now I took another photo for reference, and the sky is much better in this photo, but even so there is some sort of weird artifacting happening in the sky. Now this photo was taken, this photo I took it just to see how well does the portrait mode work in nighttime, and it actually did a really great job here. Now if you look, the edge detection isn't the best, especially at my hair area, and one of the things that I noticed is that the photo looks a bit out of focus. Every portrait photo that I take, if you zoom in, there is no finer details, it looks a bit out of focus. It is still perfect for sharing your photos such as on Instagram or WhatsApp and things like that. And this is actually one of a very tricky situation because one of the side is really overexposed and the other side is really dark. And I think the Gcam hands it perfectly well over here. Now I'm showing this photo because I found how differently both these cameras respond to different colors. Now in this lighting situation, it is a very tricky one. It was pretty much night and there's a lot of light and there's a lot of things happening in the background. Now I have blurred the person's face because I don't have the consent, but regardless. Now you can see here the LG has this tungsten color going on, the white balance is pretty off, the color balance is pretty off, and it is a pretty decent photo I would say, but it is still very soft. Now switching over to the Gcam's photo, there is a night and day difference here. Now the skies are pretty much more accurate here. It's much more clearer, it's much more brighter. Looking over to the background, you can see the finer details, you can see all the lights and its accurate color. Looking over to the green plants over there, you can see the real color of these plants. Now these plants you couldn't even notice in the LG's stock photo. And looking at the woodworking, there is still more details happening around here. And even in the water, all the lights happening. I think this clearly represents what these cameras can do. I think these two photos have to be the most drastic difference that I've noticed by taking from the LG and the Gcam footage. Now under direct sunlight, I would say it's better to use the LG stock camera over the Gcam just because there is a difference in color temperature and the Gcam's photo turned out a bit greenish. Now this is fine if you can work with it, but even so I still prefer the LG's photo in daylight conditions. Now going over to somewhat trickier and night conditions, there is no competition here. The Gcam definitely wins, and especially if you need things like portrait mode and things like that, the Gcam is so much better. Now also one thing I need to remind you is that the Gcam takes time to process. The HDR plus photo takes around 15 to 30 seconds only to process, and my device, I've noticed that it does heat up sometimes when switching back and forth between the LG camera and the Gcam. That is my conclusion here. If you're taking photos in strong daylight, go with LG's stock camera. There's nothing going to be wrong with that. Now if you need to go with some more tricky lighting conditions, a bit more nighttime, go with the Gcam because it is so much better here. The colors are more accurate, it takes more time, it's more clearer, it's not as soft as LG's photos. Most of LG's photos in nighttime completely falls apart. The LG software doesn't do much justice to its hardware over here in nighttime. And that's all about it for this video guys, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like this video and subscribe to this channel. Hopefully I'll be making more content in the future. Take care and bye.